Arthur Finch didn't just live in the city, he owned the night. By day he was Arthur Finch, the prodigious analyst at Crestwood and Baines. His life was measured in stock figures and quarterly reports, meticulously curated data, and the cool, professional hum of a six-figure salary. He was a master of his professional domain, commanding respect with an immaculate suit and an even more immaculate sense of self-assurance. His spacious downtown apartment, occupying the 23rd floor of a sleek glass tower, was a monument to his success, a modern, minimalist sanctuary of polished concrete and expensive Italian leather. By night, however, his life was measured in entirely different metrics. Bass drops, champagne corks, the electric thrill of a crowded dance floor, and the almost ritualistic conclusion of walking home with a different, dazzling woman on his arm. His routine was a predictable cycle of excess: work hard, play harder, and never, ever form a commitment that lasted beyond sunrise. The conquests were never serious. They were glittering, temporary artifacts of a weekend dedicated to the pursuit of pure, unadulterated sensation, gone before the Monday morning alarm clock chimed. Arthur's younger brother, Michael, watched this life of relentless acceleration with a mixture of pride and unease. Michael, a software developer living 2 floors below him in the same building, was the steady counterpoint to Arthur's volatile shine. He often tried to temper Arthur's pace, suggesting quiet dinners or weekend hikes. "You're going to burn out, Art," Michael had warned him, nursing a beer while Arthur poured himself a third scotch. Arthur had merely chuckled, the sound dry and confident. "Burnout is for the mediocre, Mike. I thrive on the heat. Besides, what's the point of this life if you don't drain the well?" This particular Saturday night, Arthur decided to drain the well dry. He arrived at the Velvet Room, the city's most exclusive and dimly lit club, around 11 p.m. He navigated the sea of bodies, accepted the inevitable greetings, and settled into his usual corner booth, a vantage point from which he could survey his kingdom. The hours dissolved into a blur of costly liquor and fleeting conversations. As the music intensified and the club began its slow, inevitable churn toward last call, sometime past 2 a.m., Arthur saw her. She wasn't just beautiful, she was an arresting vision of dark elegance. She stood near the perimeter, almost concealed by shadow, yet radiating a magnetic stillness that drew the eye away from the gyrating, flashing center of the room. Her gown was a deep, midnight blue velvet, clinging to her form with a fluidity that suggested water, not fabric. She wore no discernible jewelry, yet she seemed adorned with an inner luminescence. Her hair, the color of wet obsidian, framed a face of stark, sculpted beauty. She moved with an unnatural grace, seeming to glide rather than walk, drawing eyes but never meeting them. Arthur, a seasoned veteran of the nightlife and a man generally immune to awe, felt a strange, cold pull in his chest. It wasn't the usual aggressive surge of lust. It was something more profound, almost fatalistic. He rose, pushing aside the half-empty glass of scotch, and approached her. The closer he got, the stronger the uncanny feeling became. He reached her side, and the surrounding noise of the club seemed to recede, muffling into a distant, underwater roar. "You're far too beautiful to be standing alone," Arthur said, the line trite, yet delivered with his signature, compelling sincerity. She turned her head slowly, and her eyes, deep-set and strangely dark, finally met his. She smiled, a slow, ancient expression that didn't quite reach the darkness in her gaze. It was a smile of recognition, as if she had been waiting for him all along. Her voice, when she spoke, was a low, resonant whisper that cut through the club's noise. "Am I Arthur Finch?" The use of his full name, unprompted, gave him a momentary, sharp jolt. "You know my name," he responded, attempting to maintain his suave demeanor. "I know many things," she whispered. Her name, she finally offered, was Leda. The rest of the night unfolded in a haze of increasing strangeness. They didn't dance. They didn't drink much. They simply spoke, or rather, Leda spoke in cryptic, mesmerizing fragments about beauty, decay, and the long shadow of time. She possessed a chilling, absolute certainty that captivated Arthur, silencing the usual flirtatious banter he relied on. When the club lights flickered, signaling the end of the night, Arthur took her hand. Her skin was cool, almost marble-like beneath his touch. They left the club, not with the usual loud promises and laughter, but in an almost profound silence. Back at his apartment, the penthouse's expensive automation systems dimmed the lights and played a soft jazz score. The night unfolded, unforgettable yet strangely muted, as if happening through thick glass. Arthur felt a consuming, primal connection, yet simultaneously he felt a strange sense of cold distance, as if he were watching himself from above. Arthur had a hard and fast rule. He was always awake by noon on Sunday. The rule wasn't for virtue, it was for efficiency. It was enough time to shake off the night's excesses, hit the gym, and prepare his mind for the coming week's professional warfare. But Sunday morning, Arthur Finch did not stir. The bright, midday sun streamed through the apartment's panoramic windows, illuminating the untouched breakfast he'd laid out on the counter. The phone, vibrating silently on the bedside table, was ignored. Noon came and went. Then 1 p.m. 2 p.m. Michael Finch was the first to become truly alarmed. He had called Arthur several times, expecting the usual hungover grunt or the cheerful post-club bravado. Silence. He checked the building directory and confirmed Arthur's car was in his reserved spot. Arthur was reliable, almost obsessively so. A missed noon check-in was unprecedented. At 3:30 p.m., Michael stood outside the apartment door, rapping a loud, worried rhythm on the heavy oak. "Art, open up. Are you all right?" Only a thick, heavy silence answered him. He knocked harder, shouting Arthur's name. Still nothing. The silence felt unnatural, not the quiet of a sleeping man, but the quiet of an empty vacuum. A cold dread began to settle like lead in Michael's stomach. He called the building manager, fabricating a story about an urgent, family-related emergency. With the master key in hand, they approached the apartment again. The manager, a man named Mr. Harrison, inserted the key and twisted the deadbolt. Michael braced himself, expecting to find Arthur passed out on the couch or a messy post-party scene. They forced the heavy oak door open. The sight that greeted them stopped Michael mid-step. The apartment was not messy. It was eerie. It was cold, strangely and intensely so, despite the thermostat being set to a comfortable 72 degrees. The air was thick, not with the smell of stale liquor or perfume, but with a scent Michael couldn't place, something like old cedar, damp earth, and the sickly sweet odor of wilting lilies. It was the smell of a funeral parlor, a terrible aroma in a bright, modern living space. Michael's eyes darted to the bedroom, the door slightly ajar. He pushed it open slowly. Arthur was lying on his king-sized bed, his body partially covered by the duvet. But he wasn't sleeping. His skin was pale, almost translucent, the color leached entirely from his lips. He was drenched in a cold sweat that plastered his hair to his temples, and his eyes were open, wide, glassed over, and staring blankly at the ceiling. He was alive, barely, his breath coming in shallow, shuddering gasps. His chest rose and fell with the frail, irregular movement of a dying insect. He was utterly unresponsive. Michael rushed to the bed, shouting his brother's name, shaking his shoulder. Arthur did not react. His pupils didn't track, and there was no spark of recognition. Then Michael noticed the other occupant of the bed. Dominating the other half of the vast mattress, right beside Arthur, was a casket. It was a monstrous object, polished dark mahogany sized for a man with heavy, tarnished brass fittings. It was closed. It lay there, centered on the pristine white duvet, as if it had been placed by careful, deliberate hands. The sickly sweet, cedar odor was strongest emanating from the dark wood. Michael recoiled with a cry of pure shock. He stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. Mr. Harrison, initially frozen in the doorway, stammered incoherently into his radio, reporting an impossible, inexplicable scene. There was no sign of Leda. No sign of forced entry, struggle, or anything to explain the presence of a coffin in a 23-floor penthouse. It was an object that should not exist in that reality, yet it was undeniably there, cold and heavy, pressing against the mattress next to Arthur. Frantic, Michael called emergency services, his voice shaking beyond control. The police who arrived were bewildered, their professional cynicism dissolving into confusion and, frankly, fear. The paramedics, grimly accustomed to the city's tragedies, approached the scene with outright terror. Arthur was rushed to the nearest hospital. Doctors ran every test imaginable. There were no drugs, no poisoning, no signs of physical trauma whatsoever. His vital signs were weak, his brain activity minimal, but medically there was nothing to treat. It was as if his life force itself had been leached away, leaving behind only the frail, empty shell of his body. The police opened a case, deeming the casket and Arthur's condition suspicious and unexplained. They dusted the casket for prints, finding nothing but the residual coldness of the wood. The security footage of the building entrance showed Arthur entering alone, or at least appearing to enter alone. They saw him walk past the camera, his hands seemingly held around empty air, his posture slightly unnatural as if supporting an invisible weight. There was no sign of a woman or a massive 6-foot wooden box. After 3 days, with Arthur's condition stabilizing but his consciousness lost, his family made a heartbreaking decision. Following the insistent pleas of his distraught mother, they insisted he be transported back to their native rural home, a sprawling, quiet farmstead 200 miles outside the city. The family elders believed that only the familiar earth, the clean air, and the traditional care of the community could possibly draw him back from whatever dark place he had fallen into. Arthur Finch was carried home. His old room, overlooking the quiet fields he had been so desperate to escape, became his permanent sanctuary. He was placed in a worn antique armchair facing the window. He was fed through a tube, his body meticulously cared for, but his spirit was forever absent. He never spoke again. He never tracked movement with his eyes. When Michael visited, holding his brother's hand, Arthur did not squeeze back, did not recognize the familiar face blurred with tears. The sharp, vibrant man who had conquered the city's nightlife and the financial markets was gone, replaced by a still, staring effigy. Since the night he brought the beautiful, silent Leda home, Arthur Finch never truly woke up to his complete senses. The city, the clubs, the music, and the fleeting women all faded into a horrific, profound blankness, leaving behind only the chilling, unspoken horror of what he carried into his apartment on his last night. The case was eventually closed as a medical mystery, but the Finch family knew the truth. Arthur had traded a life of dazzling surface pleasure for a final, terrifying depth, and now, he existed in a perpetual living coffin, forever haunted by the silent, cedar-scented presence of the thing he had let into his life. He had sought the edge of human experience, and the night had finally claimed him, leaving him adrift in an endless, terrifying void.